Welcome back, my Psychians. So we are starting with our Module 78, which is all about how we can create kind of bad social relations, right? How do we kind of develop prejudice and stereotypes? And, let's get into it. So Module 78, antisocial relations. So first of all, we have to know what prejudice is, right? And something that I always remember is that stereotypes come before prejudice. So, prejudice is simply called prejudgment. So, a prejudice is a unjustifiable, usually negative attitude towards a group and its members, often of a different cultural, ethnic, or gender group. So, aspects that go into prejudice are beliefs that are kind of leading to our stereotypes. We could have learned them from our parents, from our friends. It's very common that our brain tries to put people into categories because we want to make sense of things, right? Emotions tend to be heavily involved. Fear, envy, hostility. And it creates predispositions to act, so to discriminate. We start with stereotypes, which leads to prejudice, which leads to acts, right? So again, how our mind, our body, and our actions all correlate together, right? So, prejudice works at a conscious and unconscious level, but a lot of it could be unconscious where you don't even realize what you're doing. Thus, prejudice is more like a knee-jerk reaction to the conscious decision of our opinions. But I do want to ask yourself, does it make it more or less excusable? But I try to think back to my any prejudice that I may have had, and it was almost like it was what was expected of me, right? And so just thinking about how it lives on a conscious and unconscious level, that sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing it, right? And usually the four big causes of prejudice are the haves and the have-nots. We tend to have, if we're in the out group and we're not in the in group, that itself can start a prejudice, right? Because we always want to feel wanted, right? So the haves versus the have-nots, social division. So I always think of kind of the role confusion of Erickson's life for the adolescents. Emotional scapegoating, and we'll talk about that. So hang on to your hats for that one, along with just thought patterns of cognition. Remember how A gets to B gets to C? Same thing with prejudice. So if there's a trigger for our whatever prejudice group that we have, that we have thoughts of, it does lead to B, which does lead to C, right? It's a part of our thought patterns. And, we acquire them over time, and sometimes we don't even realize that we're acquiring them. Oh, for anyone who likes to know the bell, let me pause it. All right, my friends, sorry about the bell. I was doing lectures. My last two videos were when I was at home, but then we had our lacrosse game, and then I didn't have time to come back and, do more. So I'm back at school today. So again, these are the four causes. And, just kind of similar, like I said, the patterns of thought that we are automatically tied to our behavior, we can, it's so ingrained with history and what our parents tell us and habits. And, we have to actively break our prejudices on a conscious level, I believe, to start making change. But again, it is a process. So for anyone who knows me, let's talk about the in and the out groups. And I am a Chicago Bears fan, and my sworn enemy are the Green Bay Packers. So maybe this will help you understand the scenario. So we have something called the in and the out groups, which are a part of our social identities. And the in group is people with whom one shares a common identity, us, right? So my in group was my athlete team at college, and my in group in high school was, the jocks and a little bit of a different group as well, right? But then there's the out group. Those perceived as different than the people within the group, so we consider them a them. So have you ever heard of like us and them, us versus them? no one wants to be a part of the out group, right? We always want to feel accepted. But this is high school, right? I mean, this is like, I always think of Mean Girls, right? Where like Katie wanted to be a part of the in group, and she left the people who were in the out group, right? Her original friends. And Mean Girls is a great kind of example of this. But then I also want you guys to remember there is in-group bias. So for example, it's our tendency to favor one's group. So I'm a diehard Chicago Bears fan. So like, I always favor the Bears, and like if they get a bad call, I always assume it's a bad call because it's against my team, but it could actually be a good call. So again, the in and the out group. So the they and thems, us versus them. So again, I think of Mean Girls, but we have an in group, an out group, and then within our group, we have our own bias to favor ourselves, right? Favor our own friend groups per se. So let's talk about the scapegoat theory. A scapegoat, right, is kind of, we provide someone to blame. So it's a theory when prejudice is an outlet for anger, but it's by providing someone to blame. So here's 3 really strong examples of this in history, and I'm going to remove my camera real quick. Okay, so you can see all of it, but these are just small examples. So Japanese internment camps after the attack of Pearl Harbor, the blaming of Jews in Nazi Germany for the years of economic despair. After 9/11, what did we do to, oh gosh, certain groups of people? And I mean, this has been happening throughout history, right? We always need someone to blame. When we talk about grief and we talk about, trying to make sense of a traumatic event, part of it is denial. And also, it's trying to bargain and be like, who can I, who's to blame? We always try to find someone to blame because it can't be us, right? Because we have our own bias, right? So again, the scapegoat theory can be seen throughout history. So the cognitive roots of prejudice, it's just like I said, we have a natural need to quickly categorize people. And this is right. So people all have their groups that they follow. Again, thinking of Mean Girls, the jocks, the athletes, the artists, we all have these categories for people. And when we stereotype that group based on those experiences we've had with them, that's when we start to create that prejudice for that group, right? So maybe, for example, Sally had a really bad experience of a sorority person making fun of her or whatever it was. And now she has a huge prejudice against all fraternities and sororities. She's generalized her prejudice, right? It's very common. And it could be based off just one interaction with people. And then we just assume everyone else is like that as well, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this leads us to the just world phenomenon, which is a vocab term. And it's essentially, the danger in this phenomenon is that it results in victim blaming. And, I thought I had one more. And, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of layers when it comes to cognitive prejudice. And we do tend to, again, choose to blame someone because it makes our own coping that much easier. Okay, that much easier. Okay, so now I want you guys to do a little squiggle in your notes, and we are going to talk about aggression. And this falls under our antisocial behavior as well, and our, antisocial relations. So let's talk about aggression. It refers to a range of behaviors that can result in both physical and psychological harm to yourself, others, objects, and your environment. And this type of behavior centers around harming another person either in a physical or mental way. So you could be verbally aggressive along with physically aggressive. And remember, aggression can be passed down genetically because of our amygdalas. So again, this is where our Amy's come out, okay? So when it comes to aggression, there is the genetic influences along with the neural influences. So genetically, they have seen that animals who have been bred for aggressiveness, for sport, and at times of research, Twin studies show that aggression may be genetic, and again, it can be linked to the Y chromosome, which has to do with testosterone. So there is a correlation with higher testosterone, higher aggression, which is why we usually see women be more verbally aggressive while men are usually more physically aggressive. Again, our difference of our brain chemistry. And again, neural influences, just like we talked about, in the limbic system, which is our emotion center, our amygdala and our frontal lobe are heavily involved in aggression. Because remember, our amygdala is in charge of our fear and aggression, and our frontal lobe is in charge of our actions, right? And our quick decision making. So it kind of goes hand in hand, right? And just like I was talking about, we have found the biochemical influences, essentially prenatal exposure with testosterone can increase aggression even in female hyenas. So they put injected testosterone into their bodies, and there was extreme aggression in the female hyenas. So again, there is a connection with, and also for animals who got castrated, right, or fixed or whatever, the aggression tends to go down. You can see it in dogs, right? So after male dogs are fixed, they usually are less aggressive, less territorial. But yeah, unless they develop habits before, my friends, because that's a whole nother story. But yes, okay. Learning and cultural mechanisms when it comes to aggression. My friends, aggression it's a part of our learning, right? We learn how we see aggression in our family. And when aggression leads to desired outcomes, we tend to connect it, right? So one learns to be aggressive. So we do see more aggression in individualistic cultures than collective, right? So individualistic is kind of very American, and collective is more in it for the group of people, right? They do it for the group. So we do see there is correlations with higher aggression when it comes to individualistic cultures. Cultural undertones of violence also have a huge impact of violent tendencies. So again, culture does play a role as well. If there's any cultural rules that play a role. My friends, we have all experienced the frustration aggression principle. And I can say this because we've all been through COVID. The frustration aggression principle is essentially this. We have a frustration of a goal that we cannot meet, and if we cannot meet it, it generates aggression. It's as simple as that. So frustration of not reaching our goals leads to aggressive behavior. So most research has been shown that there could be more direct causes with aggression and frustration along with emotion, but what they have found that, so let me give you an example. Let's talk about this person. Let's say Bob. Bob is behind on all his bills. He can't pay anything. His business was shut down due to COVID. He's frustrated because he can't reach his goal because of something that's uncontrollable. And then he starts to get angry. And then he goes to rob a bank to get money, to get his goal in order to survive. Frustration leads to aggressive actions or words, right? So when we get frustrated, we get aggressive, which is why a lot of people were not happy during the lockdown, because we were frustrated that we could not live our lives, which leads to aggressive behavior, which is why the news is like a war zone. And, again, people are frustrated because we can't live our lives like we used to. And remember, we're individualistic culture, so we thrive on our rights. And now we're all frustrated because they have been disturbed, right? Which leads to aggressive behavior. So the frustration aggression principle. And, again, a few things that impact our aggression, which is nothing really new. Aversive events in people. Studies show that those are miserable often make more miserable. Again, positive Patties versus negative Nancys. So if you surround yourself with negative people, you tend to breed more aggression or frustration. Stressful environments. When people are highly stressed, they get irritable and they start to snap. I don't know if any of your parents get really stressed and they snap at you, but I know my mother did. Whenever she was in a stressful situation, she would displace her anger and her frustration on someone that could take it, right? Also, a fun fact is that when it does get hotter outside, people tend to get angrier. It is a correlation, my friends, not a causation, but we something to think about. Okay, this is our last slide for aggression. I will stop it here and we will have one last video.